This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 9, Episode 18. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network of podcasts brought to you by guns.com. Today is Wednesday, December 27th, 2023, as of the recording of this episode. And I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined today by Jacob Paulsen.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Good old-fashioned Wyoming howdy.
It's a little bit more of a Toy Story-esque thing now.
Yes. Glad to have you with me. Today we're going to be talking about, well, the title of the episode is how most DGU blunders come from this one problem, which really what we're going to get into is talking about how concealed carriers involved in defensive gun uses fail to have their values, their motives, whatever, in line with their actions, right? It's a very important thing. We see this all the time. Jacob proposed this idea. It's something that just about every time we do a Justified Save episode of the podcast, we come across a story or two that touches on this thing. Even in justified instances, we see where this doesn't align. For the the lawful gun user, they don't quite have their mindset in the right place for making sure they've got the right idea, the right attitudes, the right decisions even made ahead of time. So I look forward to discussing that with you. Today's episode brought to you by Dummy Ammo from Ready Up Gear. New and updated design from Ready Up Gear with the dummy ammo is worth checking out. We'll talk about it some more here in a minute and later in the episode. If you guys want to check that out, go to concealedcarry.com/dummy ammo. And also today's episode is sponsored by Range Tech Shot Timers, which of course you guys probably know and are well familiar with. If you're not, check it out at rangetechtimer.com. Lead times are coming down on the shot timers. So if you've been waiting on one for a while, those are starting to get produced in a bit greater, more consistent quantity. So check it out, rangetechtimer.com. So let's get into this topic, Jacob.
Yeah. For me, this is grounded in this situation where I was pondering on this mindset thing, and I was I think if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, you've heard us comment on incidents and say, well, that person shouldn't have done this or shouldn't have done that, and this is why. And I really was struggling to figure out, like, what is the real root cause of the bad behavior, that we see all the time. I just saw a story today, some guy was going out to check on his, car thieves in his driveway, and he got shot, by the car thieves. And we talk about, oh, that was bad. You shouldn't do that. Don't go out. Why would you leave the house? And we get into that, you're safer in the house. Why put yourself at risk? But I was trying to go like a level deeper than that and ask myself, but what is causing the person to feel they need to do that, right? Because a lot of the times we see things like this and it feels natural. How many stories have we seen, Riley, where after a threat is ended, a good guy continues to pursue a bad guy? We see it all the time, and it's easy to say, don't do that. That's not a good idea. But it's something else to say, well, what is at the root that's causing the person to choose to do that, right? Obviously there's some emotions involved in the moment, but what is the thing we could do, teach, explain, or understand for ourselves that would cause us to not fall into the trap of that kind of bad behavior? That's really where this pursuit led me, is trying to figure out what do I have to know or believe in order to prevent myself from falling victim to these, what I would call, natural traps of bad behavior.
Yeah. This isn't getting at the root cause just yet, but I'm going to throw a couple things at you, just kind of ponder on this, and I want to hear your response a little bit as well. Some common things I hear, specifically addressing some of the circumstances you just brought up, are things like in the case of like a car getting stolen, for instance. Well, I mean, that's I had to stop and prevent that theft. That car is my livelihood or something to that effect, right? In fact, we hear that in instances where someone gets involved with preventing a theft, and let's say that they're an electrician and all of their electrical, and electrician type tools are being stolen, or even materials, and that stuff costs a lot of money, and the argument is, well, that's my livelihood, like that. If I don't stop that, even with potentially deadly force, um, but even just getting involved, like you have to get involved, because if that happens, like I can't even support my family, right? Like that is a huge infringement. I mean, it certainly is a huge infringement, but like there's almost like this mental connection that's made, this thought process of, well, it elevates to almost a place of using deadly force to prevent that theft, because this is putting my life in jeopardy from a not being able to provide for my family kind of standpoint. The other attitude, or argument that I hear is, with respect to just like going after somebody, is, well, I gotta, prevent them from getting away. If somebody doesn't stand up, and this is actually a really common one today, if someone doesn't stand up for this, then like who else will? And we got to start. The police aren't doing anything, so citizens got to band together, and we got to take action, because otherwise everything's going to go to pot. If people just allow this crime to take place, which, by the way, is a very legitimate, argument to make. We see examples of that all the time. We see stores. I just saw someone shared it was, I think it was Brian, actually, or who was it just recently? Jason, that works for us, was showing me a video from the store that his wife works at, I believe, showing somebody just coming in and just broad daylight, just, without a care in the world, grabbing product off the shelves and like hightailing it out of there, and like, so we see the argument made of, well, somebody's got to step up and do something, or they're just going to keep getting more emboldened. So you see what I'm getting at? Like,
Sure.
That's those, and I know that's not the root cause we're talking about just yet.
No, but those are reasonable. Those are seemingly apparent, reasonable justifications for the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, this episode is less about what is a justifiable reason for behavior that we traditionally consider to be not good in our community. It's more about your what is your objective? Like, is your behavior in alignment with your mission? Mm-hmm. I was not in the military. I've never served for our country in that way, and so I've never, I can't relate to the concept of being given mission parameters and a mission and been sent out, to go patrol some city in Afghanistan or something like that. I've never done that. But I am familiar with the concept of having a mission. We run a business. Our business has a mission. So I think that we have to ask ourselves, like, what is our core or primary objective as an armed citizen? Right? Like, what is the reason I stick the gun in my pants? What is the reason I have the gun at the house? And there can be multiple reasons. It can be a tiered thing, right? Like, my number one purpose for me is to preserve the life, right, of my family, of my children and my wife. That's my number one objective. I have a secondary objective, which is that I myself survive, that I not die, so that not only do they live, but they have a dad and a husband, right? So that's a secondary objective. And I can have a tertiary, and I can have as many objectives as I want, but they do have to be they have to be prioritized. It has to be clear what my primary objective is. And then if I can serve a secondary objective without putting it too much risk, whatever I deem a justifiable risk, the primary objective, then that's fine, right? But it comes down to this root concept, because the truth is, we always, all of us, act in accordance with our strongest, deepest held belief. And so I just call into question, effectively what I'm saying is, someone is a liar if they outwardly claim that their primary objective, their number one thing, is their own survival and the survival and safety of their loved ones, but they run out their front door and chase down the street after people who have guns. Like, to me, you're lying. Like, that's not true, because your behavior is not reflective of your objective, of your mission. And so I don't believe, I mean, I believe that maybe you said that out loud, that maybe at some level you even want to believe that that's your primary objective, but it's not if that's your behavior, because we always behave in alignment with our core belief. And so people who say that, they're out of alignment, and they just don't recognize it, or they're not willing to admit it, or they don't want other people to know what their real objective is.
I think it's an interesting, idea that you posit there. I think that there's truth to what you said. I think evaluating that at a deeper level, we can be led to a place where we find that, as far as the lie that's occurring, where actions don't reflect, what we state that we believe or that is our priority. Uh, I think that there's probably a couple of reasons for why that can be the case. Um, I think one major one is that not enough people that carry a gun or have a gun available for defensive gun use haven't thought through all of the different possible scenarios and circumstances they might find themselves in. And that I perceive that a lot of, and this is, I think, certainly true when we see what would be otherwise lawfully or law-abiding citizens that get involved in situations where the use of deadly force is used, that they cross some sort of like legal line or even a moral one, let's say, um, that a lot of times they're just reacting, and that they haven't. I think you're right that we probably behave in a way that's consistent with our deepest held belief, but maybe you haven't gone to that place yet ahead of time to really ask yourself, well, but what if this, or what if that, or what if this other, what if these theoretical things actually occur? What is my course of action? Because like that evaluation of, will my actions be consistent with what I believe and think and feel, will they be consistent? That evaluation, I think, has to happen ahead of time, because in the moment, if you're just kind of trying to figure it out, I think it's really easy to make mistakes. I think another explanation is people just aren't honest with themselves, uh, and they may not even realize that, right? And again, is probably from a lack of thought or self analysis of who they are as a person, because not a lot of people, I think, like us, spend a lot of time. I mean, I think this is true of or not necessarily true of a lot of our listeners, because I think our listeners are here for a reason, and they're probably, the elite of the concealed carrier world. But I think a lot of just regular common folk out there that carry a gun or use or have a gun for self-defense, uh, don't spend a lot of time where we do, where we actually think deeply about these topics.
I think that's fair. And I think there's other factors too. I think there's a factor that lack of preparations means that we don't minimize risk. It means that sometimes we act out of fear. So I think there's a lot of other things going on. But most of the time, what I think is happening, based on the commentary, based on the conversations that we're involved in, that we see on the interwebs, okay, I think what's happening is that people are not focused on the right person's outcome. And this is really where the genesis of this conversation and this episode started, when we were talking about this. Because I think what happens is, I'll give you a recent one. I was talking to somebody who, we've all heard this 100 times, right? But it was the good old, I just don't know if I could shoot someone conversation. I just don't know if in the moment I could do that. And I just couldn't help it. This is, it was the straw that broke the camel's back on this particular instance. Because I said, what in the world are you talking about? And they're like, well, I just don't know if I could shoot. I'm like, why are we talking about the person getting shot? What does that have to do with anything? And they're like, well, I just don't want someone, to lose a son or a daughter or a husband or whatever. I'm like, I still don't understand why we're talking about the other person's outcome at all. Like, why would you make decisions about your own behavior focused on or based on some other person's outcome that you don't know, presumably as a stranger? That sounds like insanity to me. It makes no sense at all. Like, how is it relevant? Like, why would you have the gun? Is so that you can determine other people's outcomes? And I lost it. And the person I was talking to, they got it right away. They're like, oh, no. I mean, I guess I wouldn't have the gun. This is not a person who carries a gun, right? We were talking hypothetically. No, but they said, I guess if I had the gun, it would be to protect me and my family. I'm like, right. So why then would you decide whether or not to do that based on your concern of some other third party stranger's potential outcome in terms of them being injured or dying or some tragic emotional trauma relative to their, that their family has to endure? Why would that person's outcome impact your decision? Like, is that, would you carry a gun in order to impact other people's lives? Is that the purpose? It just it didn't make any sense. And so I think the more we had this conversation, the more they started to understand, like, concealed carriers, at least in my opinion, the reason we carry the gun is to impact our own outcome. And so all my behavior has to be consistent with my outcome or the outcome of my family, right? The people who are listed in the objective, the mission that we were talking about, right? And so when I act in a way that's inconsistent with that, it's generally because I'm more concerned with the other person's outcome than my own.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And that's what I liked in particular about the way you phrased this topic suggestion in our, internal chat. It was when you said that the topic essentially is people focusing on their attacker's outcome and not on their own or their loved one's outcomes. And I like the way that's phrased because I think that's so true in so many ways. It covers and asking that question, why are you worried about that person's outcome, your attacker's outcome, and not your own outcome? It addresses so many of the problems that we see, right? It addresses the situation like you were just talking about of a person essentially saying, well, I just don't think I could take a life. Well, guess what? If the choice is your life and it's not even so much their life,
No, it's
right?
irrelevant.
Right. If it comes down to your life and I may have to pull a trigger while aiming at another person, right? Like, which one would you choose? And I know that, and I truly believe there are some people that genuinely, um, believe that they cannot take another person's life, that they would rather sacrifice their own before they themselves took someone else's life.
Sure, that's fine.
Right. Right.
Right.
But still, that is such an interesting point. I understand that, and I've met people I believe that are in that category. But it's such an interesting thing to me because it's like, well, hold on here, like this person, this attacker, this intruder, this robber, whatever, carjacker, they chose this for me. I didn't choose it, and that's how that's how I think of my own concealed carry, I guess ethics, if you will, is that it's more about me being my own agent of my life, that I want to secure my life, and that I'm trying to, I carry a gun to prevent someone from being able to take that agency for my life away from me, right? And because they're the instigator, because they started it, because they picked the fight, that they initially were the ones that threatened my life. Like, I may end up in the end result may be that I take their agency away, take their life away, but they ultimately chose that, because they're the one that instigated it, right? So, like, in my mind, the math just checks out. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever, So, but that asking this question of are you more focused on an attacker's outcome versus your own outcome? It also addresses situations where a person, goes after an attacker, a bad guy. It addresses as far as Like imagine this, like one area where people get in trouble sometimes is chasing after their initial attacker, right? And like, why would you do that?
I'm gonna pause you, Riley, before we go there. I want to come back
Yeah,
to the whole I don't know if I could take someone's life thing,
go ahead.
because we're scratching the surface here. Like
Sure.
we have to consider that the phrase itself is inherently flawed. Because what does the phrase say? I don't know if I could take someone else's life. The phrase is focused on, like, it's not even certain that this person is going to die. Like, are you saying that if in the case you have to defend yourself, that you then are going to make sure that the other person dies? Because that's inherently what you're saying. Like, you're
Yeah.
suggesting inherently that if I'm ever in a defensive encounter, I have to choose between me living or that person living, and the other one will die. That absolute of that context is so ridiculous. It's still focused on the other person's outcome. Like, it's not about me choosing if the other person's outcome, if that person dies or not. It's about me choosing my outcome, right?
Yeah.
I choose to live. I choose to defend, certain people. So that's the other, like, inherently problem here, is that we're focused on this binary outcome of either I defend myself and therefore the other person dies, I take a life, or I choose not to defend myself and therefore I die.
Mm-hmm.
And that is crazy. Like, that kind of binary thinking is still rooted in the wrong mindset, in the wrong outcome. Like, we're still thinking about their outcome. Like, the choice I have to make is certainly I think that an acknowledgement needs to be made. And so I hope I'm not, being ridiculous. An acknowledgement has to be made that when I shoot at people, they might die. And I suppose at some level I have to accept that as a potential outcome. However, it's irrelevant to my decision making. It just has nothing to do with it at all.
Yeah. The common, it's become, I think, more common to say than maybe, when we started this podcast, but we've been pretty consistent since the beginning of, using the following phrase of, well, we don't shoot to kill, we shoot to stop a threat. That's more clear as a statement, right? Because it's not about the outcome of that other party that's involved. It's about what is happening to me. Well, a threat. I want to stop said threat. And when that threat is done, I'm done. Right.
Yeah.
And so that phrase of you don't shoot to kill, you shoot to stop a threat, I appreciate in this context of our conversation here today, because it's consistent with
Yes.
that. Right. And that's the right attitude and right idea to have here.
That's where the problem lies, right? Because most people who get into that conversation, if you're in a classroom and someone raised their hand and said, "Hey, my friend, buddy, cop friend, whatever, told me if I shoot, I should shoot to kill." For them, they're thinking binarily between shoot to kill versus shoot to injure. What their friend was trying to communicate was this idea of, "Hey, don't shoot him in the leg. Don't shoot off warning shots. Like, if you're gonna have to get to work, like, do it right." Now, unfortunately, they communicated it in a way that was consistent with the other person's outcome, right? That they, make sure that person's dead. Like, that's horrible. That's unethical. It's illegal. It's immoral. It's bad in every possible way, right? So that's the problem, is that binary choice between shoot to kill and shoot to injure. Both choices are focused on the other person's outcome, and that's what makes them flawed. The idea of shoot to stop the threat is consistent with our own outcome. And that's what makes it appropriate.
Yeah. In our preparation for this episode today, we went through a number of past justified save stories. Primarily, most of them come from the what not to do category that we, quite often share on our justified save episodes of the podcast. And one that kind of stood out to me is this incident that happened. When this happened back in 2020, May of 2020, in Boone County, Kentucky, and an individual, it was an attempted burglary of a home. So you have a person that was, I think, just they encountered them It just says an attempted burglary of a home. So it doesn't even know, it's unclear if they're trying to gain entry to the home or what. But the point is here is that the homeowner fires multiple warning shots with their gun and then engages in a physical fight and eventually subdues the burglar. And I'm not saying I know this is what happened or that this was the motivation or whatever, but it makes a person wonder when you read this. It's like, okay, first of all, they fire multiple shots. Okay, if in fact this is a home invasion, it says home burglary, but if that's what this was, that this person was trying to gain entry to the home, the homeowner's in the home, they probably have a justification to use deadly force, right? Um, Instead, they fire multiple warning shots. And then they don't even like they just go into a physical fight. So that one story stood out to me because it made me think, okay, is this one of those people that's like, I don't think I can, take a life. I don't think I can fire my gun at somebody. And it certainly is plausible. I think a plausible explanation for why they handled this the way they did. I could be reading too much into it, but that it wouldn't surprise me if that was a factor here.
Sometimes really bad tactics put us in situations where we have to make what I'll call compromised decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So think of the gentleman who, the door starts getting knocked on and, or the doorbell rings late at night, wakes up, grabs his gun, goes to see who's at the door. And there's a door and then like a storm door. Okay. But he didn't lock the storm door. So he goes to open the primary door, gun in one hand, grab an opening door with the other hand, looks out, and the gentleman out on the front porch has his hand on the handle of the storm door and is opening it. So now instead of one door opening, now we got two doors opening. So bad tactics, right? Poor decisions up to this point have led to a homeowner being in a situation where they have to decide what to do in a very short window of time, right? They've lost the element of time in order to make good decisions, and they're being forced to make compromised decisions. Yeah. And so that decision leads to, I guess I better start pressing the trigger because I got, less than a second or second and a half before this bad guy is going to be on me. Well, so bang, bang, bang. Now someone's been shot. Well, unfortunately, this was not a bad guy. This is a guy who went to pick up his siblings who were at a friend's house. Mom says, go pick up your brother and sister. He gets in the car, starts driving to go get them. The address he was given was wrong, or he read it wrong. So he goes to the wrong house, rings the bell, thinks that he's going to go in and get his siblings and pick them up and take them home. And instead he's getting shot by the homeowner. So, someone might just go, well, it's lawful, but it's, lawful but awful. It happens, kind of thing. Well, it shouldn't happen because poor tactics, poor preparedness, poor education, poor training led to a situation where we had to make compromised decisions. So it'd be hard to say that what that person's mission, what that person's objective was, if they were focused on their outcome or the other person's outcome. It doesn't always come into play. And that's one of those exceptions where that's a DGU blunder that happened, not because of poor mission and objectives and deep held purpose and understanding that led to focus on the wrong person's outcome. That's an example of a situation where it's just like bad tactics, bro. Bad tactics put you in a situation where you had to make a compromised decision.
You're talking about the Jarl case, that example. That was actually a teenager, right?
Yeah.
And that, there were bad tactics there, but I also think that there was some, if I recall correctly, the gentleman did the shooting didn't seem to have much remorse. No. So that kind of makes you wonder.
Probably an objective mission problem there. Here's another one. Speaking of bad tactics, right? So we have a circular driveway. Car comes into the driveway thinking they've arrived at the house they're going to be at. They look at the address. They're trying to figure out, we're at the right house or not. It takes them a minute or so. While they're trying to figure out the right house, homeowner goes and gets the gun. Ooh, some suspicious people are in my driveway. They ultimately decide, no, this is the wrong house. And so they continue to pull out and drive away. Homeowner opens the front door, runs out and starts shooting and guns down and kills the young woman in the back of the car. So, that's a mission objective problem, right? This is a disconnect. And this sometimes happens because our own emotions are such that if you're the kind of person who's likely to go out and buy a gun and stuff it in your pants or stick it next to the bed in a safe and say, I have this because man, society is going to hell in a handbag, and I got to be ready for all the things because I got to be my own first responder. Well, unfortunately, though that's a good attitude in my opinion, and we would support that 1,000,000,000%, it does lead to a situation where we're more likely to perceive threats where there are none. We become maybe a little bit more paranoid, and that paranoia sometimes leads us into a situation where if our moral compass, or I'll better, moral compass is really not the right word, if our core objective is not well aligned, right? If we don't really truly think through and understand that what this is all about and why we're going to do what we're going to do, then we make bad decisions. In that case, like, these are bad people. I've already decided they're bad people. Any evidence I receive will only support my existing belief. And so I can't let them drive out my driveway. I have to stop them from escaping. I must submit them to custody, prevent their escape, or keep them from hurting other people down the road. Therefore, I'm going to open this door, run out, and shoot at them. That's completely out of alignment with my objective and my mission, right? That's completely focused on someone else's outcome and not my own, right? I only increase my risk by walking out the door in terms of my primary objective.
Well, that's what I was starting to get into a moment ago. Is when you told me to put the brakes on, you wanted to continue talking more about the shooting to kill versus shooting to stop kind of concept. Is that when we see individuals that get involved in situations that either they go too far with the use of force, or they continue to pursue a situation with deadly force, or in the case actually of one man, as we are again prepping for the episode in Washington, I think kind of Seattle area, maybe a year or so ago, it wasn't that long ago. He thought what he perceived based on some communication from a store employee and like what he observed. He thought a man and a woman leaving a store were shoplifters, and he went and like stopped their cart and was like, "You stop right there," and they end up in this kind of standoff, this altercation, and it leads to this man, who felt like he was trying to do the right thing initially, but he ends up shooting this other man who was a complete innocent party. Wasn't even the person that was shoplifting from the store, just happened to be identified as the shoplifter by this completely unrelated third party individual that just doesn't understand what the situation is. And now all of a sudden, he's facing charges, right? That like life altering charges because he thought he was doing the right thing. And that's another example of where this question is so key to ask yourself of, wait, is this I'm more concerned about their outcome or my outcome question? Because I'm looking at that, it's like, that's not my problem, bro. Like, yeah, okay, so they're shoplifting, like, what do I care? I mean, other than I have a strong sense of justice, like a lot of other people probably do. Law-abiding people generally have a strong sense of justice and want to see justice served. And I think that's where some of these kind of things come from, is this place of, well, justice must be served, and doggone it, we got to prevent this, whatever thing from occurring, because if somebody doesn't do it, then who will? And so it's going to be me. But I have to still look at that objectively as an individual and go, by me getting involved in this, like a part of me wants to, but I have to put the brakes on and go, whoa, because it's just increasing my risk. Number one, increasing my, not just the legal risk, right? Because of if I do something wrong, like it could be simple, it doesn't even have to go so far as being an actual use of deadly force that gets me in trouble. It could be that I get charged with a false imprisonment or kidnapping type charge because I held them against their will, right?
Sure.
It could be as simple as that. So
felony menacing, aggravated assault.
So it not only increases my legal risk, but then there's the other side, which is it increases my physical risk, because if I just stayed out of it, no harm, no foul for me, I move about, go about my day. But I get involved, and maybe this person that I accost now, maybe they're just more skilled than I am. And next thing I know, I'm in a beat down, like, and I end up in the hospital in a coma, like there's just so many things that can go wrong when we get involved in things that again are motivated by me being more interested in somebody else's outcome and not making sure I'm looking out for numero uno.
Yeah, and I think that we're not trying to be cynical. I think that there is some arguments in favor of trying to prevent injustices from happening, and anyone can justify stepping in and trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
I got no problem with those arguments, but I think we have to just think about our objectives. Like I said at the beginning, I said, well, you can have multiple objectives, right? I can have a primary objective, and I can have various secondary objectives, right? So think of our friend. I say our friend. We don't know this guy at all. I just speaking generally. Think about that dude, Michael, in Florida, who's now in prison because he pulls up to a gas station. He sees someone is parked in a handicapped spot who doesn't appear to be handicapped. They have no handicap tags. The driver's in the store, but the person in the passenger seat's a young woman. She doesn't appear to be handicapped. So he decides that's an injustice. I'm going to do something about it. Well, I have no theoretic problem with saying, hey, I don't think that's okay, and I want to do something about it. But it always comes down to, for one, how do you do it to minimize risk? And then second, at what point, as we go down the incident, do I cross the line of jeopardizing my primary objective beyond what is appropriate to achieve some secondary objective, right?
Yep.
So in this case, he went way too far, right? He starts pounding on the glass. He's yelling at this girl. Eventually, the boyfriend comes out, who was the driver of the car. Physical altercation. Boyfriend pushes him down on the ground, draws his gun, kind of threatens with it for just a little bit too much hesitation, probably in the sight of the law, and then he fires, right? So now we've crossed the line where we've threatened our primary objective by putting ourselves in risk of a physical altercation, getting shoved to the ground by somebody who's much younger and stronger than we are probably. And now we feel like we got to go to a gun. And from there, obviously mistakes were made as well. You're a shoplifter guy, and so is it okay to be like, I think that person's a shoplifter. I think I'm going to say something to the store representative, or I'm going to just maybe if, depending on how you feel about your objectives in life, maybe even saying something like, hey, excuse me, did you guys pay for that? Oh yeah, we did. Oh, okay. I guess I'm, my bad. Maybe I'm just, or maybe I don't even confront them. Maybe I'm just going to snap a picture and then go see someone who works at the store and be like, I think these guys were shoplifting. I took their picture. There's any number of things that can be done when you think you need to do the right thing. That's not what if you think we're saying, don't get yourself involved, avoid all confrontations all the time, because it's all inconsistent with the primary objective of your own, best case scenario. That's not that's a short-sighted view of what I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah. There's more, in other words, what you're saying is there's more nuance than what probably, you initially see on the surface of such, making such decisions. And I definitely agree with that. I was going to throw out one other kind of common thing that we come across, and I didn't have a specific story to support this per se, but there was no shortage of them as I was going through our catalog of all past Justified Save episodes. And that is, I think, where a lot of road rage incidents, and there's quite a few of those that unfortunately end in the shooting of another person or both people in some cases. But I think that a lot of times those road rage incidents start because of this, again, failing to consider numero uno and your outcome and minimizing, your risk and liability and all that. And just thinking about how dare they pull out in front of me or ride my tail or, I've got to get them back. I've got to teach them a lesson, I think that's another place where a lot of times people get themselves in trouble in a right hurry. And I think this is one that a lot of people could probably relate to, because we probably have all been there, if we're being honest with ourselves, at some point where somebody else on the road makes you really, really upset. Have you ever brake checked a person? Have you ever, flipped the bird? Have you ever honked your horn at another driver? Yeah, those are all instances of you wanting to be like, hey, you, I got to stick it to you, man. And next thing you know, guess what? You picked the wrong person on the wrong day, and they're willing to go maybe a step further than you were, meaning I mean, I think this is where a lot of these kinds of things happen. And I think about this all the time, driving around, in the Denver metro area. Uh, eh, there's unfortunately, it seems like about every other week at least, some kind of report of a shooting that occurs on the road, that likely started as some kind of road rage type thing. And there's a lot of not so nice people out there that you don't know who you're honking your horn at, and that might be all it takes for them to be like, you know what, I've had enough for today. Bang, and next thing you know, you're being shot. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that seems kind of extreme, but
But it happens.
that's the reality.
Yeah.
And again, is another place where it's like I've had definitely I think I've gotten better with it over the years. When I was a younger driver, I was definitely more hot-headed. But I find myself catching myself, more these days where it's like, whoa, I don't know who that dude is, and I don't need to be that next person, on Channel 9 News, being talked about getting shot in a road rage incident.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, all these kind of anger management issues tend to come down to us being focused on the other person's outcome.
Yeah.
That person needs to be taught a lesson. That person has to be stopped. That person should be arrested. That person should, have their nose broken. Like, it's all about them. It's all about their outcome and not our own. Like, what is most consistent with my primary objective? And yeah, maybe I'm going to take a picture of the license plate and I'm going to report them or something. I mean, the point is, there's any number of potential things you could do that if you feel justice needs to be had. But at what point does your behavior put your primary objective at too much risk? At what time do you cross the line into being more concerned about their outcome than yours? That's the problem. That's when you've crossed this line and you've put your objective at risk. And that's the nasty one. And it really blows my mind. We had an incident not too far south from us in the Denver metro several years ago now, where two dudes come into the house and they beat on the homeowner a little bit, give him a concussion, as I recall. He's unaware of the status of his wife and children. As it turns out, they're just upstairs, told to stay in a bedroom kind of thing. This is just a home robbery. The two bad guys are just stealing stuff, grabbing things, and I don't know, whatever valuable things they grabbed. And eventually they get in the van and they drive off. So like, you have to ask yourself, what is the person thinking? This man who is now, no longer at risk. The two people have left the home. So far as he can tell, he saw them leave. And he runs and grabs his gun. He doesn't check on his wife, doesn't check on his children, doesn't see what their status is, but instead he runs out and gives chase down the road, shooting at the back of the van. Okay? Like, does that sound like someone who is caught up in the emotion, or someone whose primary objective is really focused on their own outcome? Because to me, I'm thinking to myself, bro, you're just going to abandon your wife and children? For all you know, they're upstairs bleeding out. Any number of potential things. You have no idea. All you know, you've been beaten to really bad. You have a concussion, and the two dudes who are in your home are both leaving all by themselves out the door. So like, where is the focus in that moment? What is the objective? Whose outcome are we focused on, and at what risk? Not only are we risking ourselves and doing that, but we're risking the actual, the wife and the children. Like, to me, that is so crazy. And it comes down to this core idea, this simple thing of, whose outcome are you focused on? Because it ain't your wife and children. In that moment, nope. Like, you have jeopardized that primary mission objective by focusing more on the bad guy's outcome.
Hey, real quick, let's just take a brief moment. I want to make sure I hit again on our sponsors of today's episode. First of all, dummy ammo by Ready Up Gear. We've sold dummy ammo from Ready Up Gear for a couple years now. Then it got really hard to source. And actually, as a result of all that, we went through a complete redesign process on these dummy ammo rounds from that we now sell at readyupgear.com. Actually, a direct link, you can go to concealedcarry.com/dummy ammo, take you right to that product. Super excited about what this redesign means. It's far superior to what we were previously selling. So if you have some of the old Ready Up Gear dummy ammo products, and you want to get some more, definitely consider checking out the new updated version. Not that the old ones are bad, just the new ones are just that much better. They're way more consistent. They feed better. They're more durable, I think. Um, yeah, they're awesome, and super excited that our supplier that makes those, and to be working with them again on those, and it just is super super cool. So check them out. And we're actually in stock on at least, we have 9mm available right now. 5.56 I don't think we really have right now. Maybe we have a little bit, but we are working on more calibers, hopefully in the near future, which is something we weren't really able to support previously. So pretty exciting. concealcarry.com/dummy ammo. The other thing was Range Tech shot timers. Jacob's been working really hard making some. We've been, here in the shop making some of the components for those, trying to get those turned out in a more timely fashion. So definitely, if you're looking for your next shot timer, Range Tech shot timer continues to be the industry leader for the best value for sure in terms of shot timers that actually work out there on the market. So check it out, rangetechtimer.com. Couple of things I want to make sure we hit on, Jacob. Let's take a couple of kind of comments/questions. I think you said you were going to come back and touch on that. I don't know if you felt like maybe you already did, but Mark on Facebook pointed out one counterpoint is the fear of freezing up and losing the gun or making the situation worse because you have a gun. Someone who brings a gun to an incident but can't use it properly or freezes up can cause more problems than prevent them, couldn't they?
Sure, yeah. The title of this episode is "More DGU Blunders Come from This Problem," presumably than any other problem, right? But we didn't say all DGU blunders come from this problem. So this idea of alignment with the core objective, this idea of being focused on my outcome and not the outcome of the attacker, is still, in my opinion, where a large number of these issues come from. But there's other issues. One we already talked about today, which is, I'll say, bad tactics lead to compromised decision making. But also there's this simple fact of like not adequate training. Poor training and freezing up, I think, is a very natural thing that can happen to dang near anybody, no matter their level of training. But making poor decisions, right, or like using the gun in a way that's not consistent with good accuracy, with good tactics. Bad decision making often comes because of a lack of training and education. And fear is an absolute reality, but I also think fear tends to be rooted in a lack of training, knowledge, and education. So we'd like to believe that this podcast, is a good source of understanding, of getting perspective and being clear on these kinds of things. Hopefully, people who listen to this regularly are less likely to have these problems. But I think this is one of those less common issues: this idea of fear and or bad skills or lack of skills.
And those can be kind of almost like self-fulfilling prophecies of sorts, like where they reinforce each other. Certainly, I have found as a person gets more skilled, they generally become less fearful, right? Fear sometimes is rooted in the fact that we're uncomfortable or uncertain about our abilities or even what we should do in certain circumstances. So yeah, 100% on that, brother. There was something. Oh, I was thinking we have a couple stories that I shared links to in our little chat. And by the way, everything we're referencing here today, we'll make sure are included. These are all old stories that we covered in Justified Saves episodes, going back even in a couple of the cases a couple years ago. But all these will be shared in the show notes of today's episode again. Couple of stories were incidents where the good guy, so to speak, the victim, if you will, the person, and they were actually both homeowners. They discharged their firearms at things they thought were intruders when they were, in fact, not. In one case, that was the Texas case where just a maintenance worker checking. I think it was like February or something last
Yeah,
year.
frozen pipes or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they got a deep freeze down there in the Dallas Fort Worth area. And so that was causing a lot of problems. They don't get that cold that often. And so maintenance worker for this local, apartment or housing complex decides to go and check on pipes and things. And, there's probably some things that person could have done better as far as like communicating what they were doing, because it was after dark and whatnot. But they're basically on a balcony, checking on a pipe. And the homeowner's like, oh my gosh, someone's trying to break into my house. And what they did is they fired through the back patio window or door and shot and killed that maintenance worker in the process. In the other case, a little bit more of a happier ending. The homeowner, it was a pool maintenance worker that came by to check on the pool as per probably contract. Again, it was later in the day. They had a flashlight. It was dark. The homeowner's wife, she alerted him, her husband, to the fact, hey, there's someone out in our backyard. They got a flashlight. He observes that. He grabs his AR-15, and then he dumps the entire magazine, 30 rounds worth of ammo, out the back window and door at this perceived intruder, which wasn't even making intrusion into the home yet. And I use these two examples, I think, to, again, it may not be as readily apparent as as being examples of what we're talking about, but I still think it kind of is. In number one, I think there's some fear at play in both these cases that, oh, what do I do? And you misread the situation, and you maybe don't, either you haven't considered, or you're unsure from like a skill perspective of, well, I don't want to. The idea here is being that, hey, guess what? You're within the confines of your home. Is your home secure? Great. If so, hey, call 911. Like, imagine how it would have ended if they called 911 on this maintenance worker checking on frozen pipes, and police showed up and they're like, oh, hey, who are you? Oh, I'm just a maintenance worker. Here's my identification. Oh, okay. All good then, right? And everybody goes home happy. Instead, we made an assumption, and started blasting away before anybody even tried to make entry into your home, which presumably is secure. It's like there's that aspect. And the other side of it is where it may not be as readily apparent as to what we're talking about here. But I think that there's some kind of element of, again, wanting to, how do I phrase this? When you're thinking about other people's outcomes and not your own. Maybe Jake could help me out here, but when, like this, in the case of this 30 round, like the one that's really kind of interesting to me, Jacob, is when that dude unloads 30 rounds from an AR-15 out the back window and door. Like, that kind of tells me a little something that, hey, dude was trying to make sure he got this guy. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it's a combination of, sometimes these things overlap, right? Both these incidents are, in my opinion, a combination of all the things we're talking about. We're definitely focused on the wrong person's outcome. We're definitely focused on the bad guy's outcome, not our own, because that behavior is not consistent with maximizing our own survival in that situation. We're definitely acting in fear and paranoia. This is the idea that there be human outside on my property, therefore that human is here to kill me, and I need to act in accordance with that. And we're definitely using poor tactics, which lead to bad compromised decisions, right? In this case, poor tactic being, oh, there's a glass door and there's someone on the other side of it. Like, what? Like, can you not retreat? Can you not use some sort of cover? Can you not observe and report? Like, it's just bad tactics. Effectively putting yourself at risk by walking into that room and then presenting the firearm and introducing it into the situation. So I think those are, that's an overlapping situation where we see all these things we're talking about leading to a bad outcome, right? Fear and paranoia, bad tactics, and definitely we're focused on the other person's outcome, therefore not in alignment with the proper objective.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
There's a good comment in here, Riley, from Brian Schuler. He says,
I think we both tried to click that.
Oh, okay, I'm out. You click.
There it is.
Brian says, when you intervene in an initially non-lethal verbal altercation, theft, even shoving match, and it escalates to a lethal threat, who's at fault? The original instigator or the one who escalated it? So this kind of thing actually happens all the time. In fact, one of our most popular episodes is an episode I did with attorney Andrew Branker where we talked about the gray area. But I think we have to think about this in terms of this conversation and not the legal repercussions, though they are almost always in alignment. Yep, take that to the bank. I just said it. Almost always the best moral decisions are also the ones that are legal. And very rare that it's not the case. So anyway, so here's how we have to think of this. I'll go back to our shoplifter guy who thinks he's identified some shoplifters, decides to intervene, blocks the exit with his own cart, won't let them leave. Now we get into an altercation. We're shouting back and forth, arguing. Now it becomes physical. Maybe a punch gets thrown. So dude draws gun and decides he has to fire. Who's at fault there? Well, I think, from the perspective of the law, what we would say is, I'll give you another one. Actually, I just tweeted this one today. So here's an incident from a few days ago that I just shared on Twitter this morning. Lady comes into a store and she says, like, according to the witnesses, she says, says something like, I don't have to hurt any of you, but I'm gonna. And then proceeds to start spraying bear spray at all the people in the store. Okay. Mark asks, people still tweet? Yes, I tweet. Or I X, or whatever it's called now. I don't even know. So she starts spraying bear spray at all the people in the store. Okay. Well, a gentleman who works in the store sees her come in, has a lot of awareness, sees that she's dressed funny, sees that she's got something in her hand, hears the comment she says, goes for his gun, pulls it out, presents it, as she starts spraying everyone with bear spray, shoots at her, bang, hits her in the shoulder. She drops the spray. She boogies out of the store, takes off, leaves her bag, her purse behind. Eventually, they catch up with her, find her, charge her, arrest her, etc. And the bag she left behind, her purse or whatever, there's a, quote, additional weapons in the bag. So the question is it reasonable, right? Is it reasonable for me to believe that this particular use of force, verbal or otherwise, is going to lead to serious bodily injury or death? Like, that's the way the law would word it. The way I would think of it in terms of the context of our conversation today is it like, do I believe that in order to maximize my primary objective, in order to keep my primary objective is successful, that it's my best course of action and that it's necessary, in fact, for me to escalate the situation? Because if the answer to that is yes, like, escalate the situation, introduce the gun, get the job done. Right. But there's any number of things, like, it's not a black and white thing. Your past history with that attacker is going to be a factor. Things that are said verbally, the size of the individuals involved, the number of attackers, things that are in their hands or tools, or, any number of potential issues, physical limitations. If you're old or, on blood thinners, or you got a pacemaker, or your bones break easy, or I don't know, whatever else. Like, so, I think all of that context is relevant to this idea of, sometimes it is consistent with my primary objective and with me maximizing and being focused on my outcome to escalate a situation. And escalate maybe is technically not really what's happening. Maybe I'm dealing with what I perceive to be the realistic and reasonable threat.
So all of that you said, to essentially say what Mark said, which is, it depends. And I'm going to step in here and just to say, hey, also, we are not attorneys, nor is this considered to be legal advice or interpretation. So take it, for what it's worth, which is worth, pretty little.
That's right. I'm just some random dude on the interwebs,
but no,
talking about shooting people.
So the example that Brian's basically asking about, though, is it's unfortunately, Brian, as is the case. And I've struggled with this for years, when I'm teaching a concealed carry class and students ask similar type questions. And it's like, look, it's hard to boil those kinds of events down into something so simple as a question like what you're asking. It's overly simplified, to be honest. It's going to depend on so many different factors and circumstances involved in that case. But you want to read and understand the law as best as you can, which talks a lot of times about, who started the altercation. Did
how do we define the initial aggressor?
Did the initial situation resolve kind of temporarily, and then you pick it back up again? Like that could be a whole other thing. Like, you may not have been the initial aggressor, but then you become the new initial aggressor again later on. And so there's so many factors here. The point is, though, I think what Jacob was getting at is make good, sane, correct, moral decisions that are rooted in good principles. Okay, know who you are as a person and what you stand for, and make sure that you're watching out for numero uno. And
don't start fights.
Yeah, just don't start fights. It's not a good idea.
I'll add another thought along those lines, which is the idea of removing ambiguity.
Yeah.
So in situations where it's not clear who the initial aggressor is, it's not clear who's the attacker, or it's not clear if the attack is lethal in nature or has the potential to become lethal or serious in nature, right? In those situations, dude pushed me off a bar stool, or I pushed the dude off the bar stool because he insulted Peyton Manning, or I'm in a dark parking garage and guy's got a hooded sweatshirt up and I can't see his face and he's walking toward me. It looks like we're going to meet at my car at the same time, right? In these situations where it's just not clear who the aggressor is, it's not clear if the level of force being used is likely or intended to cause death or serious bodily injury, or will lead to something like that. And in those situations where it's not clear, your job becomes the removal of the ambiguity, right? Your good tactics, good decision making, consistent with my outcome and my primary objective, lead me to do what's necessary to remove ambiguity. And that's done by a number of things, right? It's done by me saying things verbally, asking someone to stop, asking them, "What are you doing?" Tell them, "I'm not, back off." It's also done by me putting cover between me and that person. The guy in the dark parking garage is going to arrive at my car at the same time. It's about me turning and going a different direction, or it's about me circling around the vehicle to see if they keep working around the vehicle. It's about me saying things. It's about me turning lights on. It's about me removing myself from this back family room where I see the guy in my backyard who might be or might not be about to come through the glass door, and taking myself into a position of cover and calling 911. So It's about removing ambiguity by doing what's necessary to effectively force the situation to become clear.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, for instance, like Mark here comments, and for Mark's sake, Mark is actually an attorney, but I'm pretty sure he's not offering legal advice in his comment here. But he talks about remembering the elements of self-defense. One of the elements of self-defense is avoidance. Even if you're not legally obligated to avoid a certain situation, it's almost never bad to do things that show that you attempted to avoid the situation, even when you're not even the initial aggressor, right? Like just being able to show that I tried to avoid this or bring this to a resolution without going to violence is going to reflect much more favorably upon you in a self-defense case. And of course there are other elements of self-defense which could be talked about, which we've touched on. We maybe haven't hit on them specifically as well, this element and that element and so on and so forth, but that's not, that's neither here nor there as far as the topic of today's episode. But I just kind of wanted to touch on that. And I think that's kind of one of the core things that's being discussed here, is like, for me, as I perceive it, avoidance is huge. Even again, if you're not legally obligated, for by avoidance I mean like to retreat, right? Even if your state, your statutes don't require you to retreat from a situation, like stand your ground, in other words, it's still a good thing to demonstrate avoidance of the situation, because that will that's generally what innocent parties do, is try to avoid things and not start them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, and I realize we're coming close to the end of our time, so I'll summarize with my thought here, which is, as a responsible concealed carrier listening to this podcast, I presume that you probably go through a lot of what if scenarios in your mind. Oh, I'm sitting in this restaurant right now. What if somebody comes through that door? Oh, what if you read a story in the news and you say, oh, what if that happens to me? What would I do? So when you're doing the what if things in your mind, ask yourself if the way you think you would respond is consistent with your primary objective. And is your primary objective ultimately founded on your outcome and the outcome of the people you intend to protect and defend? Or is your primary objective written, thought through, and founded based on the outcome of the other person? Because it's my belief and argument that if your objective is founded on the other person's outcome, your objective is flawed. It is significantly out of alignment and flawed.
Yep, I agree with that. I think it's a good place to wrap this up. Yeah, you're correct that we are wrapping it up. It's time. I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation today with you. I think it's a fine place to end the year 2023 as far as this podcast is concerned. Looking forward to 2024. I think it would be a good idea, as people tend to make New Year's resolutions and whatnot. Not that you have to wait for the New Year's to do such things, but hey, if you listen to this episode and you learn something from it, I would make the resolution. I would make the decision to spend some time considering these things that we've discussed. Spend some time evaluating yourself as an individual, as a concealed carrier, as a Second Amendment supporting, law-abiding, American citizen. Consider who you are, what your values are, what's important to you, okay? And make sure that you make, that you think your way through of those things that you might find yourself faced with at some point. We hope not, obviously, but that's the way these things go. They come a lot of times when you least expect them to. You need to know who you are, and you need to make sure that your actions are consistent with your beliefs and with your understanding of your values, and in accordance with hopefully the law as well. And I think probably that's true of most of you, or else you wouldn't be here listening to this podcast. So make that resolution to spend some time considering these things so that you know where you stand in these kinds of situations that sometimes do and can occur ahead of time. I think it's important. That's why we have these conversations, why we talk about and even do the podcast a lot of times, do the justified saves, episodes and whatnot, is to help prompt us with ideas and food for thought so that we make good decisions really ahead of time. So we're not just flying by the seat of our pants, in the heat of the moment. That's where I'd end it. With that, a reminder of today's episode sponsors are Dummy Ammo from Ready Up Gear. Again, concealedcarry.com/dummy ammo, DUMMYAMMO. And also Range Tech Shot Timers, rangetechtimer.com. Thanks for you guys' support. We did a poor job, I think, me and Brian last week, of wishing everybody a Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever. For me in our household, we had a wonderful Christmas. I hope that you did as well too, Jacob, you and your family. And here we have a few days, although many of you may be listening to this after the fact, the new year coming in. And so we wish you a happy new year. And we look forward to enjoying 2024 with you all and bringing you more podcast content as well throughout the year of 2024. So thank you for your support. And thank you, Jacob, for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.